Ladies and gentlemen, we are really delighted to catch up with you through this new episode of Regards Contemporains in order to share the story of Dellasie ANING, an Afro-American humanitarian artist and entrepreneur who moved to Accra in Ghana in 2018 ahead of the year of return. Please allow us to start this interview with our first query to her. Humanitarian, artist, and entrepreneur, these are the main features usually highlighted by medias about you. But if you have to put aside these features in order to introduce yourself, what would you say?
Um, I would say I'm a very passionate woman with a lot of talent who strives to make the world a better place in my own special way. I'm striving to leave a mark and a legacy on the world and represent the continent of Africa for its greatness, its resilience, its beauty, and its ingenuity. I feel that I'm a true Renaissance woman in every sense of that word, and a true Pan Africanist in every sense of that word. If you look at my contributions through music, my contributions through humanitarianism, and my contributions through my entrepreneurship, what ties all of these together is my Pan Africanism. At the heart of everything that I do, I strive to contribute in a positive way to Africa and represent that positivity to the rest of the world. So, yeah, that's how I would describe myself.
Thanks for this answer. And if you don't mind, let us proceed with the following query. If you have to share your activities or to present them to our readers or followers, what would you say?
If I had to present my activities to your audience, I think they would be songwriting, recording, and performing as an artist. I think that's really at the core of my branding because I've been doing music since I was literally a baby. I started writing music when I was just 2 years old, like writing little nursery rhyme type songs. And my parents used to, tell our relatives and friends about it. And when I was 9 years old, I started taking piano lessons. I was trained as a pianist in classical music. So I was playing Mozart, Beethoven, Chopin, Diabelli, and all of those, classical composers. And I was actually quite good. And the reason I started is I was at a party with my parents and I'd found a piano and I just started playing it instinctively. And one of the people went up to my mom and said, "How long has your daughter been taking piano? She's excellent." And my mom is confused because I'd never taken piano lessons. So my mom's like, "What are you talking about?" And the guest was like, "Come with me." And so they go into the room where I'm playing and they stood there quietly and listened to me play music by ear. So once my parents saw that, immediately they put me into piano lessons and, bought a piano and I played for years. I also sang in my church choir and my school chorus as an alto. So before I started doing music professionally as a recording artist, music was always in me. So it's a really important part of my branding. I then went on to become a hip hop artist and eventually transitioned into Afrofusion music, which is what I do now, which is kind of hip hop and soul with Ghanaian and Nigerian production. I use a little bit of the pidgin and some, traditional Ghanaian language in there, here and there too, to show the relevance of my culture. So as far as music, that's what I would say my activities have been. As a humanitarian, I am a researcher, an advocate, a mentor, and a public speaker. And as an entrepreneur, I would say I have a very keen eye for fashion, a very strong fashion background. I used to do fashion photography and blogging. I was a child model, and I did some modeling also for some photographers and some independent brands. So I have a strong fashion background. And in terms of my business, the technical side, I handle all of my books, all of my marketing, all of my PR and advertising, and all of the branding. I do have an assistant who helps me, and I do have a web developer that I'm working with. But in terms of running the business in a day to day basis, I'm definitely a one woman show. So when it comes to my branding, those are the activities.
Thanks for this answer. And now, if you don't mind, we are going to focus on your humanitarian activities. Your humanitarian activities are primarily dedicated to the struggle against skin cancer. Please, can you describe or explain us your dedication in this fight? How does it started? What are your achievements and what are your expectations?
In terms of my humanitarian work, it focuses on skin cancer in Africa and the diaspora due to skin bleaching. And firstly, I just want to say, this is not an Africa issue. This is a global issue. Bleaching is something that occurs all over the globe, on every corner of the globe, anywhere where there's indigenous people, anywhere where there's people of color, there is bleaching going on because of globalization, imperialism, colonization, and Europeans bringing with that their beauty standards, which becomes a very narrow and reductive aspiration for people that don't fit into those, aesthetics. And this is part of the reason why, people do change their color to become lighter and closer to that beauty standard. And this is one of the dangers of globalization. But anyway, back to the issue here. So, yes, in terms of how did it start? It started back in 2016. I had gone to a luncheon at my late uncle Kofi Annan's house, and my parents had told him how I had been doing music. I had just finished touring. I had toured in Canada and in Europe, and he was telling me, he was very proud of me, and anything that I needed, I should reach out to him. And I said to him, I love performing. I love making people dance. I love making people happy, but I want to do more. And you are one of the most prolific humanitarians on the face of the earth. You have done so much for people in unfortunate circumstances. You have been an advocate for those that don't have a voice, and you have done so much to try to stabilize developing nations and civil unrest. And I am just trying to do, a fraction of what you've done with your life, but I do want to give back. I do have a certain level of privilege. I have a fan base, and I want to do something positive and impactful with that. And there's so many problems in the world, like I just wouldn't know where to begin. So he told me to go home, sit down and think about what makes me frustrated, and then use that energy, use that emotion to work towards solution. So that's exactly what I did. That very night I went home and I thought about my frustrations as an artist, and one of them was colorism. Being that I am a dark-skinned woman, and that means that, things are a little bit harder for me. It's a little bit more difficult to move through and navigate through the industry or be seen as marketable, because in order to be marketable, you have to be a person that young people aspire to be, that they want to be, and men want to be with, and people have to want to buy into you. Now, anybody of any color can be that, but those that are the gatekeepers of this industry believe that it's a very small segment of people with a very specific look that can be that. And that's what makes it difficult when you're trying to be heard and be seen. So yes, colorism. When I studied colorism, that's when I came across skin bleaching and skin related diseases and skin cancer specifically. And the reason I focused on skin cancer is because in Africa, there's such a stigma against cancer that, there's not a lot of information on statistics and who has cancer and who dies from it. The statistics are very skewed because, believe it or not, people will actually pay the coroner to put a different cause of death on the death certificates because cancer is stigmatized. And if people find out that there's cancer in your family, they'll discourage, their family members from marrying into your family. And these kinds of ignorant views is what creates the stigma. So I felt like, wow, this is a situation where there are people, they are suffering, they are dying. The information is very elusive. There's a lack of press about the issue. There's a lack of funding to find out more, to treat people, to cure people, to prevent these deaths. And I want to do something about it because I myself am faced with some of these setbacks due to colorism, but I know I'm fortunate enough to have the strength to not want to resort to changing my skin because I love my skin and I love the woman that I am and I love the way that I look and I want the world to feel that way about themselves. So this really it pushed me. And I also remember, performing oftentimes, girls from the audience would come up to me and say, please don't ever give up. We need a woman like you, to blow up because we need someone that represents us. And we love Rihanna and Beyonce and, those girls, and they're great. But those women, they still represent that white beauty standard, like black beauty, but from a white beauty standard. And although they're very beautiful women, blackness and, people of color are so diverse in their beauty. Like there's not just one small segment of the population that is beautiful, but all of our shades and all of our colors and all of our features, there's beauty there. And that needs to be represented. So hearing feedback from fans and dealing with my own frustrations and observations of others and just seeing people that have bleached their skin and the damage it can do, all of these things really influenced me, getting into this work. And as far as my achievements, I've done a lot. I mean, I've spoken at the UN General Assembly, I've spoken at Columbia University, Georgetown University, different places in the world, in London, in Canada, around the US, here in Ghana. I've really gotten the opportunity to meet people of power and prestige. I had mentors like Angelica Spraggins, who was the head of the World Health Organization in New York City, and Mimi Danko, who was the CEO of the Ghana Food and Drug Authority. So I've really gotten to sit down with great leaders and pontificate with them, discuss with them, and have their support, which is amazing. I've touched people, I've reached people, I've motivated people, I've inspired people, and that is, an amazing achievement for me. In terms of my expectations, my expectations are realistic. I don't believe that because of what I'm doing, I'm going to stop everybody on the planet from bleaching. But what I like to explain to people is very similar to cigarettes. Cigarettes were very popular in the 80s and 90s to the point where you could smoke on an airplane, you could smoke in a restaurant, you could smoke in a department store. They would even make candies of, cigarettes for kids to kind of encourage them in their later years to smoke. And what happened was in the 90s, families got frustrated and they started lobbying for big tobacco to put warning labels on cigarettes because they had family members who died of lung cancer. And it was serious. People were dying of this. And, society was promoting the use of cigarettes. So these families fought really hard, lobbyists fought really hard, and they finally got labeling on cigarettes. Now, did that stop the world from smoking cigarettes? No. People still smoke cigarettes today. And they're very much aware that there's a risk of psoriasis, there's a risk of lung cancer, there's a risk of all kinds of things, and they still smoke, but at least they know the risk. And so for me, it's the same. I want people to know and understand the risk they're taking when they do, practice skin bleaching, because I don't think that everyone who does this truly understands the risk they're putting their body through. It's not only skin cancer that's a risk, but it's cancer of the blood, it's kidney failure, it's liver cancer, it's, suppressing your immune system and making yourself susceptible to other diseases. So it's a lot going on with this practice, and it's such a common, widespread practice. the bleaching, skin bleaching industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry that keeps growing. And so, yes, my fight is an educative fight. I want people to know the risk and understand what they're doing. And as long as they do, it's their choice whether they want to do this or not, but just with the right information, with the right understanding. And that's all I want. If I could reach people and educate them, great. If I could prevent some people from going down that road, beautiful. But I am not too idealistic. I do know that the world won't stop doing this, but at least maybe the world will be educated on this.
What do you think about yourself as an artist? How do you define yourself? What are your influences? What can you tell us about your career?
How I would define myself as an artist, I would say as an artist, I think I'm very uniquely talented. I think I touched on that earlier, that I started off as a pianist and singing in my church choir and the school chorus. And I went from that to, emceeing and rhyming and, being a hip hop artist. So it shows that I have a very rare holistic ability in how I approach music. Music is literally my life and it's my joy, and it's something that I will always do. I will always be a creative. When people ask me, "Oh, do you still do music?" Like for now or in the past year or so, I took a long hiatus. And so people were asking me that. There is no need to ever ask me that. I will always be an artist. I will never stop being an artist. I will never stop being a creative, even if it's just creating for myself or my friends or my family or whatever the case may be. I will always be creating because that is such an innate part of who I am. I literally started writing rhymes at 3 years old. And it's in me. When it's in you, and you can't fight it. And I wouldn't even want to fight it. So yeah, it's very much a part of who I am as a person. As far as my musical influences, I have a lot of them. So I can't just name one. So I'll name a few. James Brown, Fela Kuti, A.B. Krenzel, Sizzla, Missy Elliott, Foxy Brown, Billy Joel, Hall& Oates, Jay-Z, The Notorious B.I.G., Khalees, Pharrell Williams, Grace Jones, and you know what? So much more. I'm leaving out so many, but I don't want to go on and on forever. But as you can see from my influences, they are diverse. And so as an artist, I too am quite diverse.
Amazing and definitely great. Now, please, can you share your experience as an entrepreneur with us? If you have to describe it or to share it with us or with our audience, what would you say?
Okay, so yes, in terms of being an entrepreneur, well, the first thing I want to say is entrepreneurship is not for the weak. Okay, this is not something that you just dilly dally in or you dip your toe in. You have to deep dive into this if you really want to make it, if you really want to thrive. The first thing I would say is don't expect results overnight, because that absolutely won't happen. Don't listen to the internet, because the internet will overexpose those people who did have overnight success, that went viral like almost immediately from some stroke of luck. And they'll make you think that this is normal, and they'll make you think that those should be your expectations. Don't do that to yourself. That is absolutely abnormal. That is not the expectation. And you shouldn't put those kinds of restrictions on you, because you'll be miserable. You'll be disappointed. So come into this with realistic expectations. Most entrepreneurs I know say that the first 2 to 3 years of business is like initiation. It's to test you, to see if you can really do this. It's for you to break even and learn lessons while you're owning a functioning business. It's not really for you to have these huge profit margins and for you to be super rich. Those first 2, 3, or even maybe even 5 years, there's going to be a lot of ups and downs. There's going to be a lot of struggle. You're going to have to fail and learn and come back and go back to the drawing board and come out again and do that process again and again until you really narrow down who's your market, what is your niche, what is your voice, what perspective are you speaking from, what exactly are you offering, what is the solution you're providing, how are you different from your competitors, what makes you special, what about you is going to be the thing that consumers want versus somebody else. That takes experience and trial and error to go through. You know what I mean? Like, you're not just going to have that out of the gate. So it really is about measuring those things and also having, expectations that are reasonable. It is not a sprint, it is a marathon. So give yourself time. And I came into entrepreneurship from a place of tragedy. And I'll explain that a little. When I moved to Ghana, I reconnected with a family friend who was very, very successful, very wealthy. And I came to him because I was kind of struggling to navigate through the music business. And being that he was very successful, my parents thought, if he knows any music people, they're legit because he is legitimate. He's not going to keep company that is, riffraff. So you go to him and you see if he can help you. So we ended up becoming extremely close. And I ended up doing freelance marketing for his business. And he was paying me very, very well. And over time, our friendship grew closer and we started to date. And soon after we started dating, a few months later, he passed away, which was absolutely devastating. I have never lost someone in my life that I had a romantic connection to. That is a very unique and special kind of pain. And it's very devastating. And this happened in 2020. So it was during the pandemic as well. So in one instance, I found myself, losing the man that I had just fallen in love with and losing my income and being in a pandemic and also dealing with other personal issues. So I was dealing with a lot of depression and I felt hopeless. I just didn't know how my future would be financially. And I was scared, and because I was so depressed and grieving, I stayed home. I didn't go outside and I stayed home and I basically cried most days and was just in a deep grief and depression. But what I did do was I surfed the internet. And what I noticed was people were complaining a lot about the length of time it was taking to get packages because the postal services were swamped. And that to me said, okay, well, people are shopping online. And even though everything is locked down, people are still buying online. So that is showing me that e-commerce is sustainable. So I immediately took a 30-day boot camp course online. And I also got my hands on anything e-commerce, anything at all. I went into a rabbit hole and I was just eating, breathing, sleeping, and living e-commerce for weeks and weeks. And after when I emerged and I got my little online, certificate, and I felt confident, I decided to monetize the passion that I had for fashion because I've always loved fashion. I was a child model. I used to model for United Colors of Benetton, and I was a fashion photographer for a time. I did fashion blogging, and so I had a strong background in fashion. I even worked for Calvin Klein for a short period. So I always knew I was into style and people always said they loved my style and wanted me to be their stylist and stuff like that. So I wanted to use that energy and monetize it. So that's when I decided to start an e-commerce business with a drop shipping model because that was, pandemic proof and it was sustainable. And that's exactly what I did. And I work with manufacturers in Japan, Korea, and China. And the majority of my consumers and customer base is in the US as well as Canada and Europe. And so I have a lot of diasporians who buy my things. And now, as I'm scaling up my business, I just had my 2-year anniversary, and I'm scaling up my business to now change my business model into more African focused I guess, wares or apparel. And I'm working with Ghanaian artisans, seamstresses, tailors, and I'm creating high fashion with all Ghanaian made African print. So it's really exciting to step into this side of business. And it's exciting for me too because it's helping the sustainability effort in Africa. I'm employing local artisans that are here that may not be so privileged. Some of them maybe they didn't even graduate from high school, but they've been doing this for years. I mean, 10 years, 20 years, and they are so refined in their skill and their talent. They have such amazing talent, and it's not every day that they get an opportunity to create something that will be seen by people in the US and in Germany and in France and Amsterdam and Canada and around the globe. It's not every day they get this opportunity. So while I am chasing my dreams and pursuing my dreams and helping to add to sustainability in my local economy, I'm also helping those local artisans and seamstresses that might not have ever had the opportunity to be seen by the world in such a significant way. And so I'm getting out my dreams and elevating their dreams. And I feel amazing about this. So being an entrepreneur really is about having a passion, because if you're not passionate, you won't survive. You will deal with a lot of ups and downs. You will deal with a lot of rejections, a lot of disappointments. You will deal with broke days, you'll deal with struggling days. You'll deal with a lot of fear. You'll have to take risks. And in order to do all these things and navigate through all of this, you have to have a deep passion for what you're doing. So anybody who's looking to do business, I'll say this: if you are not passionate about what it is, drop it. Forget about it, because you won't survive. And being an entrepreneur is about surviving, but even more so, it's about thriving and putting in the work to get to that place.
You've been traveling all over the world within the frame of your activities. If you have to share a memorable experience you had through these several travels, what will it be and why?
Well, for me, it's really hard for me to narrow down my travel experiences to just one memorable one. So, if it's okay, I'd like to talk about two really special experiences. Um, the first is when I was about maybe 10 and 12 years old, like somewhere in that area. I spent a few summers in Geneva because my dad had been stationed there for a few years with the UN. And during those summers I spent with him, we would walk to Lake Genève because he lives very, very close to Lake Genève on this street called Rue des Prieurés. I remember it really well. And we used to walk to Lake Genève and walk around and eat gelato, ice cream cones, and it was really, really special. I'm very close to my father. So him having to travel or be stationed abroad for most of the year was difficult, when you're a kid. And so those times and those summers that I spent in Geneva with him were really, really special. And I still remember walking around the lake and seeing the lights and the fountains. And, I still remember the taste of that gelato that we used to eat. And just really enjoying spending quality time with him. So that was a very, very special memory. Geneva is a beautiful city, very, very clean, very nice. And I had some really nice times there with my dad. And then the other one, which is just as big, important for me, is my Sweet 16. I spent my Sweet 16 actually in Ghana, even though, obviously I was living in New York growing up, but every summer or Christmas we used to alternate coming to Ghana, me and my family. So I'm a summer baby. My birthday's in August. So it just so happened that my birthday that year that I was turning 16 was one of the years, the alternating years that we were here in Ghana. So I'll never forget this because it was so fabulous. I remember my cousin Nina Baxmati. I had the Sweet 16 at her home in East Legon. I remember we hired bouncers to stand at the front of the gate, and at the height of the party there was a sea of people outside the gate, and periodically they would call me to come to the gate and select people to come in. So I'll just be standing there like the queen, like the diva, and I'll be like, okay, you can enter, you can enter, you can enter. Then I'd go back. Because the party got really packed with a lot of my friends. So a lot of those people that were outside weren't really close friends, weren't really people that I really knew, but people that heard about it, and wanted to come. So I don't want y'all to think I was doing my friends like that. But and I remember I had 3 outfit changes. I changed my outfit 3 different times because I needed y'all to know that I was the Sweet 16 diva of the evening. I needed everybody to know. So I had all these outfit changes, and my party was so big that there was like 20 and 21-year-olds and 22-year-olds there, which is like such a big deal for a 16-year-old to have these grown adults, come and hang and wish you a happy birthday and go on about their night. Like, it was really epic. And one of the sweetest memories I have, growing up and coming to Ghana and spending time here in Ghana. So yeah, I think those would have to be the 2 most memorable travel memories. I love to travel. It really is a blessing to have been able to do that from a very young age. I think the first time I traveled to Ghana, I was about 3 months old. So I've always had a connection to home and very happy to finally be home. So yeah.
Thanks for sharing this with us. And now, please, what do you think about the world these days, especially in a context marked by uncertainties?
In terms of the New World Order and what we're experiencing, this is a very unique time. In the last 3 years, we have seen such drastic and dramatic changes in the global economy and just in culture. Because of the pandemic, there have been so many things that have trickled down into other aspects of life that we are seeing now. Like, even in terms of, remote work and how that's become way more relevant. In the global economy and in the job market than it ever was before, and also, you know, job security almost doesn't exist, in a sense. I mean, back in the days, people used to be able to work for a company for 20 years, 30 years, even longer, have a retirement fund, a nice 401k, and just know that they were secure and they would be retired and they would be fine. But that isn't the case now. And, we really saw this come out during the pandemic because people who were working for companies for 10, 15 plus years all of a sudden were laid off and didn't have any prospects. And I remember my parents always telling me, be a jack of don't be a jack of all trades because you'll be a master of none. But I heard from a friend that that's not the full phrase. The full phrase is jack of all trades, a master of none, but it's better to be good at many than be good at just one. So I think that's definitely relevant for the world right now because those people that were just focused on that one company and just working in that one space found themselves so vulnerable because now you're laid off and you're in the middle of a pandemic and you have nothing else going on. And those people who had multiple streams of income, they were able to thrive during this season. They were able to do very well and they didn't really take much of a loss because they had so many other things going on that they were able to supplement whatever losses that they experienced. And I feel like the world needs to kind of wake up to that it's important to be a multitasker. It's important to have multiple streams of income. It's important to exploit all of your talents, all of your abilities, all of the things that you're gifted with. I mean, exploit those things. Don't be shy. Don't be scared. Jump into it. You only have one life to live, and you want to live it to the best of your ability. Can you imagine there's people that live their whole lives and they know inside that they have a talent or a knack for something, but they never tap into it because they're too scared, or they never tap into it because they've always been told to focus on one thing. So they just focus on their job. Like, that's tragic. That is a tragedy. Even if you try something and it doesn't work, fine. You could move on to something else. But you're really restricting yourself from your full potential when you don't tap into everything that you have inside of you that you can do and that you can achieve. So I would definitely encourage people to multitask. And I'm not saying do it chaotically. There are steps. You don't do everything all at once. You start off with your foundational thing, your bread and butter. And once you have security there, then you branch out and you start going into other areas, maybe on your free time or your weekends, etc. And you build that from there. And then once that's built and you might have something else or another talent or another skill, then you tap into that. Next thing you know, you're doing a juggling act and you're doing it, to the best capability, because you've given yourself time and you've given yourself, the room to do everything that you can. And that's a beautiful place to be. So even though people suffered a lot during this pandemic, and even though we're in a global recession, what good is coming out of that is that people have been kind of forced into entrepreneurship. They've kind of been forced to look outside of the box and think outside of the box, because job security just isn't what it used to be. So yes, there's been a lot of suffering. There's been a lot of pain. A lot of us have lost people, lost jobs, lost money, lost homes, all kinds of things. But on the other side, there is a lot to be seen and experienced. And especially with the remote work community growing, now people can travel more. Now people can spend more time with their families. Now people can tap into their talents or their hobbies and build those hobbies and monetize those hobbies. So yes, life has changed drastically. And yes, there's been some down points, but I think we should be optimistic about these changes, because I think these changes are good. And I think they were inevitable. So let's tap in.
Thanks for these answers. And now, please, can you name three elements helping you to keep motivated despite the different current crises in the world?
Yes, three elements that kept me motivated in the crisis. I would have to say the first one is a very strong sense of faith in God, and the belief that if we as a people on this planet, we strive for better conditions in this world in terms of peace, in terms of eco consciousness and green living, in terms of the protection of children and women and the vulnerable, in terms of eradicating world hunger and increasing access to clean water. If we really think about striving for the very best that we can, it just might be possible to achieve this. One thing I noticed is during the lockdown, nature was thriving. I mean, grass was growing, plants were blooming, animals were coming out of the woodwork, because we weren't there contributing so much pollution. We weren't there with our heavy carbon footprint. We weren't there with our, noise pollution, and we weren't throwing all this junk out onto the streets and into the forests and the grass and the parks. And we weren't out there being destructive like humans tend to be. We are the most destructive animals on this planet. And being locked down and forced to stay in the house, Mother Earth was almost able to breathe again, like, and that really showed me a lot. It really showed me just how destructive human beings are. And I hope that others were paying attention, because we have to be a lot more cognizant of the way we treat this earth and the way we navigate through this world and what we do and how we can be more efficient at preserving what we have left of nature and preserving what we have left of this beautiful world and advocating for those that need it. There's so much on this earth. There's no reason why anyone should be hungry. there's no reason why anyone shouldn't have access to clean water. I mean, we need to think about these things, and you know having faith and being inspired by the beauty of nature during that time, and believing that we can be better as humans. That really was one of the things that inspired me. The second was a deep passion for all the things that I do and pursue. Living a life of passion and purpose is so important to achieving your goals. You will have so many moments of rejection, no's, disappointments, and so much frustration. But passion is the key in keeping you motivated and keeping you pushing forward. It doesn't matter how little you progress, as long as you progress. And I think comparison is the thief of joy. So don't compare yourself to anyone, because you have no idea what they're dealing with behind the scenes. You have no idea, what it is they had to do to get what they have. And it'll just make you feel miserable, or like you're not doing enough with yourself. So what you need to do and what you need to have in your heart and mind is you're competing with yourself. Every day that you move, do a little bit better than you did yesterday. As long as you're doing just a drip drop better, you are moving forward and you are progressing. So be happy with that. Just be happy with movement. As long as you keep on moving, that should be your goal. Your goal shouldn't be to be somebody else. Your goal shouldn't be to achieve what somebody else has. Set your own goals, make your own benchmarks, and move from there. So that's really important. I think, having a sense of purpose definitely kept me motivated through the downturn, through the pandemic. And it definitely helped me to come off of that, in a better position, because I feel like I'm much better off now than I was before the pandemic, which is, really amazing. I enriched myself spiritually, and as an entrepreneur, and as an advocate, and as a mentor. And these things are so important to me. The third thing would be that kind of helped motivate me are my influences. My father, my mother, my mentors, and other inspirational icons in my life have shown me just what can be achieved with tenacity, discipline, and hard work. I know that if they were able to do these things, that I can do these things too. And above all else, it keeps me motivated and it keeps me striving towards greatness. So, having the parents that I had, my father being the former Deputy Director General of the United Nations and the head of the IAEA, which is the International Atomic Energy Agency, also a faction of the UN. He achieved so much coming from a small village, and going on to go to Princeton University, being the only Black man graduating from his class and getting his PhD at Columbia, and going on to rising in the ranks of the United Nations is incredible. He was a man who, when he was a child, did not have shoes. And it wasn't one of those exaggerated stories. Like, he really struggled. Him and his siblings, they really struggled. My father lost his mom when he was 6 years old. He really struggled, and he didn't use that as an excuse. My mother didn't have an easy upbringing either, and she is very resilient. She's a strong woman. I definitely get my strength from her. She has a thirst for knowledge. She has a master's in theology. She really has always strived to be a woman of excellence and intelligence and transparency and honesty. And having parents like this, there's no way that you can't be, a person that contributes in a significant way to this world. So having amazing mentors like Kofi Annan, like Dr. Diane Stewart, and others in my life that I've looked up to has been absolutely amazing. I have been so blessed. And above all else, I have been privileged. And as a privileged person, I feel that it is my duty, my responsibility, and my birthright to use that knowledge and that privilege for the good of others, to elevate those who didn't have the same access, who didn't have the same privilege, to be an advocate for those who don't have the platform to speak. And I will continue to be that person, and I'll continue to strive, and I'll continue to represent this beautiful continent of Africa for as long as I live. And I thank you for having me on this show and allowing me the space to express myself. I'm very thankful and very grateful. Merci beaucoup. And I'm out of here. Thank you.
Thanks for these answers you agreed to share with the audience through this interview. We wish you the best and nothing less.